So with this presentation, which I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to be focusing mainly in on how we use sort of kind of the economics data to justify it. And like I said, I could spend an hour talking about this, but I think about 10 minutes. Or thereabouts. All right, so I'll make this pretty quick. And progress, I just tap this in here. All right, so in a nutshell, we do have a Community Energy Action Plan, which was endorsed by our City Council back in July 2014. And it was developed basically in consultation with about 30-odd key energy stakeholders, obviously London Hydro, Nini Gas being your major energy utilities, plus London District Energy were involved. Also consultations with Western University, Fanshawe College, London Home Builders Association. There's a lot of people who basically put in content into our plan. So when you look at our plan, it's not just about what the city is doing, but you'll see all sorts of stuff about what London Hydro is going to do, what the home builders are going to do, and it pulls all that stuff together. I won't be spending a lot of time talking about how we did stakeholder consultation, but I'm sure at some other point I'll be happy to tell you what we did in that as well. But our energy plan's goals are really twofold. One is to increase the local economic benefit from sustainable energy use and to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions with goals consistent with the provinces. So the first thing, when you look at greenhouse gas reduction goals, like I say, we're on track, and like I say, we just released our 2014 GHG numbers, and we actually showed that London did hit 6% below 1990 levels by 2014. That's actually going to our Civic Works Committee tomorrow. But so we reached that goal. But as we can all see, looking farther ahead, we've got a lot of heavy lifting to do, especially when we look out beyond sort of the 2020 timeframe. Now, our community energy plan really just focuses in over the next 4 to 5 years, really this current council's jurisdiction, because we can't predict the future. I remember 13 years ago we were talking about hydrogen, the hydrogen economy. 13 years later, EVs are on the roads and you can buy them from most auto dealers. So trying to predict what technologies will win for municipalities, that's hard to do. So our focus and our time frame really is a 5-year time frame, but keeping an eye on that we need to lay the foundations for stuff in the future. But the one thing that we did about 4 or so years ago, especially when after the 2010 municipal elections and right in the midst of the recession, everything we did as municipal staff had to be about jobs and the economy. When we talked to council, all the councillors would say, how is this going to create more jobs? How is this going to be good for London's economy? Particularly as a manufacturing city, we're pretty hard hit. So we essentially assigned a dollar value to our energy use, whereas in the past we only just talked about the greenhouse gas side. We put a dollar sign to it, and for the first time when we presented at that point, it was just over $1 billion that London spent on energy. Our former mayor, Joe Fontana, got it right away, and with him and his Sustainable Energy Council, he just said, you know what, we've got to figure out a way to keep more of this money in London, because when you look at our energy use and our energy dollars, almost 9% of all the money we spend on energy leaves the City of London. Now, fortunately, a lot of that, especially in the electricity side, that sticks to the province. It goes to places like Bruce Nuclear or Pickering or whatnot, or into OPG and Hydro One. And with petroleum fuels, in our case, especially in London, most of our fuels actually comes from the refineries in Sarnia, just an hour down the road. But still, from London's perspective, you know, that's a lot of money we're spending. And by putting a dollar sign to it, it actually helps put this issue of community energy use into something which, especially elected officials, can really latch on to, which is we are spending money and most of it's benefiting outside the city. So how did we create this? Well, like a lot of communities, we actually already have one of the key pieces of data in hand. We know how much energy we use from our greenhouse gas inventory report that we've been doing for over 10 years. So all you have to do is take that math, do the math, take those numbers, combine that with all the utility information which is available on public websites or on Kent Marketing website, and basically multiply them together to come up with that, in our case, $1 billion number. So with the City of London, we were actually, we benefited greatly from work that Canadian Urban Institute did for us with the Integrated Energy Mapping Project, which the former OPA funded for us. And one of the tools that came out from that was the energy mapping tools. And I love maps, and when we go to community events and we actually have big versions of these energy maps, we find they're great conversation starters, especially for public engagement, because people, when they see an interesting looking map of their community, their first instinct is to try to find their house. So that's, it's great for not only engaging citizens, but also in discussions with our energy utilities, especially when you have maps, in this case, showing where the inefficient housing stock is for natural gas. We've been using this in our conversations with Union Gas about how we can work together to focus the targeting of the home rental rebate programs or the low-income home weatherization programs. So they are great tools, but with the energy mapping work the COI did, the one other piece of work that was highly beneficial, which doesn't get as much as the limelight, was really the cost-benefit work that they did, where they looked at all the activities that could be done with the existing house building stock, new building stock, with renewable technologies, and all that stuff. And they actually did a cost-benefit analysis as to, you know, if you do these measures, it will cost roughly X amount per square meter floor area or per gigajoule of energy. What's going to be the benefit, GHGs, the money earned, saved, and all that. That was very, very beneficial for us when we were trying to pull this together for our plan. They also did some work in trying to estimate sort of the job potentials associated with that. So we have lots of data, but it's one of the challenges is trying to figure out how do you actually present this information, which is in an easy to understand perspective. So one option that we started to play around with is, well, let's show this information in terms of payback time. Because most people understand the concept of you put money in, when am I going to get my money back out? So we took a lot of, in this case, we took a lot of this information, showed it in terms of simple payback time, which really helps, once again, things rise to the top in terms of you get to see which activities do pay back the quickest. But the one aspect that's missing is, you know, that you're only talking about financial. Well, what's the environmental benefit from all this stuff? So the next thing we did is we took that information, and when I was talking with Greg Gilmore about this, it's like, I want a McKinsey cost abatement for all this stuff, because I'd seen this great report that they had done around, you know, global greenhouse gas reduction options. So I took that data and through a long involved process, managed to get Excel to spit this out. And I love this graph because when you talk about a picture saying 1,000 words, well, I think this actually does about 5,000 or 10,000 words. But this is showing just for building stationary energy use only, you know, all the different measures and whether they net out over 10 years, whether they end up saving money for every ton of greenhouse gas avoided, or whether there's a net cost. So for those folks, especially now we're entering this potential new era of carbon pricing, this tells a lot. So right away, this tells us that we can get about halfway to our greenhouse gas reduction goals with measures that have a net economic benefit per ton of GHG avoided, which is a great news story. This is all based on the information that we have today, and not even including what can happen in the transportation side. This also gives you a bit of a sensitivity analysis as to what impact or what the carbon price would need to be to make certain measures, at least break even. So in our case, like I say, if you look at when people are talking about $15 or $20 a ton, it's not going to really change our priorities that much. One key thing I should mention, though, a lot of this math is based on 4 or 5-year-old information, and we know that the costs of doing things have changed, especially in the renewables, has changed a lot over these last 5 years. So redoing this math on a somewhat regular basis, I think is something to be of value. Well, once again, that was very complicated. So the third thing we try to do is we try to group everything into, creating scenarios with some common characteristics. One of the things that we found when we talked with Londoners as a whole was the general consensus was people were okay with taking action on climate as long as at least we broke even. People were very reluctant to sort of spend whatever amount of money to get the maximum greenhouse gas reductions. The consensus from public opinion was, hey, as long as we end up breaking even, that's okay. So we sort of created these 3 rough scenarios where we sort of looked at the various cost benefits. We took in some of the job creation estimates that the COI had done and presented it this way. which talks about it at a big scale and shows large numbers that, we could be saving 180 million a year or up to 200 million a year, and that for things like for renewables, especially with feed-in tariffs, we could be making $500 million a year, which all sounds great in principle, but the one thing that when we dove into the numbers in more detail is that $500 million in revenue assumes that we would have 1,000 megawatts of essentially solar power generation in London, which would mean during a hot summer day, we would be producing twice the amount of energy that London would use on a typical summer day. And the current grid, frankly, just isn't configured to handle that. And without some large amount of investment in electricity storage, which wasn't taken into account when this math was done, we were really nervous about really showing these numbers. We mentioned that it's like, well, it has this potential, especially because by 2030, who knows what the grid will look like by then. But we didn't want to really hang our hats on this number. So, this was one thing that, especially during the last session we did in Vaughan, we also did do similar math on transportation energy use. With transportation, it's really hard to do cost-benefit math on that because the cost for a person to start to walk or bike to work or to carpool or take transit is saving money from day one. So you can't really do the cost benefits for transportation as much. Obviously, from a municipal standpoint, we have to spend the money on active transportation infrastructure and on public transit. But we just couldn't figure out how to do that same cost benefit math for transportation. But we did look at different scenarios where we looked at, with our transportation master plan, if more people walk or bike or take the bus, and if trip length was reduced through better urban planning, making more walkable, bikeable communities. We did the math, but long and short of it though, where the big heavy lifting comes from is really from the vehicle fuel efficiency side. The increased amount of electric mobility, plug-in hybrids, pure EVs and whatnot. That is where we found the biggest hits come from. Now you will get reductions from all that other stuff, but to truly reach those 2030 goals, we really need to take a big whack out of transportation energy use. Most Londoners are still going to be driving cars in 2030, so it's really through vehicle fuel efficiency where we see that's going to come from. So with all that information, and what we found the simplest way of showing this information was to, once again, those MBA people, I guess they are smart after all, but they're 2x2 matrices, but as an engineer, I figured I needed at least one more column in Roman there just to get to the nuances. But we took all that information and basically said, if there's things with higher payback go out this way, things with greater GHG reductions are this way. So the actions that have great reduction potential and have great payback, that's what we want to focus in on. In the case for London, being a relatively slow growth community of under 1% a year, with a lot of old building stock, fixing old stuff is where we get the biggest bang for the buck. Fixing old houses, especially pre-1960, pre-World War II, older commercial buildings in the downtown core, and also industrial process structure. That's where we get the biggest hits. District energy, we're very fortunate. We have Canada's oldest system operating downtown. So expanding that system provides pretty good bang for the buck. Solar air heating is kind of the redheaded stepson of the renewables industry, but that shows that it is a great, you get great GHG potential and pretty decent financial payback, but there's no incentives for it. We throw a lot of money towards solar PV, but nothing towards solar air heating, which on the thermal side is where we get, once again, bigger bang for the bucks. I have to emphasize though, this is the outcome for London. What this would look like for Markham and for the communities of the York region, it'll probably be different. So, but this is all about how you organize this information so you can make it really easy to understand. We also looked at our plan, how we can project our savings, especially if we looked at if we maintained our business as usual energy efficiency, and then compared that to what the impact our plan would have. So we estimated our plan could avoid $250 million a year of community energy expenditures by 2018. We also, when we talked about jobs, rather than talking about those 3,000 or 4,000 jobs a year, we talked about a more qualitative benefits. Here are the green jobs that are associated with the plan. So with our Home Builders Association, it's It's our local renovators, the people who are involved with renovating homes. That's a green job. The people who are building, Energy Star new homes, that's a green job. We have local manufacturers of products to help, whether that's, well, actually just outside, we had a solar hot water heater manufacturer, people who manufacture high-efficiency windows. There's jobs associated with that. The people who install those high-efficiency windows and people who do installation jobs. All of these things, we talked about it more on a qualitative basis. One of the things we've been trying to do as well is trying to, this term, I think Pollution Pro is working on a project, they talk about improving energy literacy, but we go out to the public and we actually have, this is at a home show where we actually had all this information on hand to really try to start this conversation with our public, because the more, especially if we can get the public to start to realize that we spend over $1 billion on energy, they'll understand why we're in the community energy planning business. So the lessons learned from our case here in London, if you can, try to do as much of this work yourself and hire the consultants to do the really complicated math, but the more of the plan writing that you can do internal, then you really own the plan. And when you're doing this work, energy mapping is cool, but the cost-benefit work is really the core of what sets your priorities. Finally, once again, this will not be your plan for your community. So it's what's really important, especially in London's case, it's the community's plan, because if London Hydro isn't doing stuff, and if Median Gas isn't doing stuff, and Western and so on, and home builders, municipalities don't have a lot of control over energy use, but we have a lot of influence. And so what our plan tries to do is to capture the fact that we're trying to influence our stakeholders, put everyone's actions into one place, into our plan, so we can let the community know, here's what we're all doing on energy over the next 5 years. So I think that's it for my presentation.